Maury, you are claiming here that Mormons were quite liberal or progressive for their time, giving women the right to vote, own businesses, and divorce their husbands. They had co-ops and practiced a form of socialism called the United Order. Well, the definition of the early Mormon church can't be simply summarized as being conservative or progressive or liberal. It was a radical movement with a lot of different beliefs. But the idea being that the Mormon church was fundamentally ethical is one that I disagree with. I don't think it was ethical for the following reasons. Personally, I think that you're trying to relate to us in this comment thread by citing values that we might agree with in order to make Mormonism sound more palatable. But if a system like Mormonism has polygamy being sanctioned and condoned from 1852 to 1890, and then it's explicitly banned in 1904, that's not a progressive, liberal, nor socialist system. Polygamy is, in its nature, inherently repressive. It makes women become dependent on men, and it limits their ability to reach their full potential nor seek their full rights. In the early days of the Mormon Church, you can also see that their government structure is drifting more towards authoritarianism, especially when they're in Nauvoo. They start to give more and more power to Joseph Smith. He becomes the mayor in 1842 after forcing Bennett to resign. He's also given certain powers that make it so that he can avoid extradition. They start to advocate for a system called theodemocracy, a form of theocracy, which is, again, at its core, not progressive nor is it liberal. We have separation of church and state because it is understood that if you have the powers intertwined, they corrupt each other, and therefore this impedes upon people's own personal rights. Again, this is not a progressive nor is it a liberal stance, and it wasn't a liberal stance at the time either. This centralization of power is what resulted in Joseph Smith calling for a printing press to be destroyed when that newspaper was criticizing him, which eventually led to his death, but also was actively impeding upon people's rights to speak freely. It also relates to how Brigham Young might have had a hand in the Mountain Meadows Massacre and most likely had a hand in the Aiken Massacre, both events that he did not face repercussion from the church itself. Finally, if you're going to argue that the Mormon church was inherently progressive, look no further than its stance on slavery. There was no reason for the Utah Territory to make slavery legal, yet it did enact in relation to service in 1852. You can read Brigham Young's message to the legislature here. This is from Governor Brigham Young himself to the Utah legislature, January 5th, 1852, the source being Journals of the Legislative Assembly of the Territory of Utah, Volume 1. So shall the condition of the poor, forlorn, destitute, ignorant savage, or African, as the case may be, become ameliorated, and a foundation laid for their advancement in the scale of useful, exalting existence, useful to themselves, to their nation, and all who shall come within the purview of their influence. There will a people be redeemed from servile bondage, both mental and physical, and placed upon a platform upon which they can build and extend forth as far as their capability and natural rights will permit. Their thraldom will no longer exist, although the seed of Canaan will inevitably carry the curse which was placed upon them, until the same authority which placed it there shall see proper to have it removed. Service is necessary. It is honorable. It exists in all countries and has existed in all ages. It probably will exist in some form in all time to come. Continued further below, thus while servitude may and should exist, and that too upon those who are naturally designed to occupy the position of servant of servants, yet we should not fall into the other extreme and make them as beasts of the field, regarding not the humanity which attaches to the colored race, nor yet elevate them, as some seem disposed, to an equality with those whom nature and nature's God has indicated to be their masters, their superiors, nor yet, again, drag into servitude through the circumstances of penury or misfortune. Those are equals, peradventure of a common parentage with ourselves, but rather let us build upon a foundation which the God of nature has furnished, observing the law of natural affection for our kind, and subserve the interest of our fellows by extending the principles of true liberty to all the children of men in accordance with the designs of their Creator. This is Brigham Young saying that African people would benefit from slavery because it would help them reach their full potential being the natural order of things, servants to white people. This is written in 1852, mind you. This is when Frederick Douglass is alive and well and flourishing. Okay, and this idea that the natural order of God is for black people to serve white people is not progressive, it's not liberal, and during its time, it is clearly ignorant of what people are capable of doing. You can argue that the Mormon Church had liberal or progressive qualities, and that is entirely possible. You can see that in other cases as well. For instance, Fascist Germany had progressive qualities. They were some of the earliest people to advocate for animal conservation, as well as starting anti smoking campaigns. However, when you take in the whole lot, it is very clearly not progressive nor liberal. Same thing for the Mormon Church. When you take in exactly what they were doing in practice and what they were striving for, theocracy, polygamy, slavery, it was clearly not a progressive movement. It was a repressive movement, and it continued to perpetuate those values well before your cited claim of it starting in the 1950s.